start. We're going to be doing this cookbook entirely in Adobe InDesign today, using all of the skills and basic tools that we've already learned in the class. We're going to create a front cover. We're also going to be able to create a couple of recipe spreads and be able to learn how to export files, so you learn how to export for print, but also export a digital version of the same recipe book. So I have some downloadable resources that you'll be able to get at the beginning of the course that will come with a couple of resources. I'm going to go ahead and talk about that real quickly. We already created a brand for this, so I have an Adobe Illustrator file, so I'm going to go ahead and double click this. And here is the document that I'm going to be supplying. It's going to be a already ready-to-made logo for our cookbook, so you don't have to worry about that. But I have it in all sorts of different colors, so if you want to do something totally different than what I'm doing, I encourage you at this stage in the course, you're ready to kind of explore your own style. So you don't have to use this logo, but I wanted to supply it for those who like to go and do the project similar to how I have it. But of course, you can go in all sorts of different directions with your own logo or a different color. You also have some color swatches here you can kind of go for. So this is a quick little logo I put together for this project. So this is going to be our cookbook. It's going to be all about desserts. Dessert First is the name of the cookbook. Totally made up book, by the way, but I'd love to make it a real cookbook someday. So this is going to be great because we're going to be working with Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign. All three are going to come together to make this cookbook. So we're in Illustrator, so there's a couple ways we can bring files into InDesign. Let's go ahead and first get our document going. So we're going to create a typical standard 8.5 by 11 inch document. It could be an A4. If you are in centimeters, an A4 would work fine. Just whatever would be your standard book size. It could be a 6 by 9. If you research book sizes, they are all over the place, especially if you're in Europe. You're going to have different sizes. I'm in the United States, so I'm using inches, but there's not really a standard book cover size. There's maybe 10 different kinds. So for this cookbook, we're just going to do something really standard. You would always talk to the publisher or printer to find an exact size if you're going to create a cookbook. But for this example, we're just going to do something really standard and simple. So we're going to go New Document. And let's go ahead and do inches. And of course, if you're in other sizes, you can do that as well. We're going to do a portrait orientation, 8.5 by 11. Let's go ahead and type in 12 pages just to have something. We can always subtract or delete pages. We are going to do facing pages. Facing pages is definitely something you want to click if you're doing a printed book, magazine, or project. That's kind of how you want to kind of design, is knowing how the spreads are going to interact. If this was a digital project, I would most likely uncheck facing pages and everything will be just a single PDF that would be easy to make a digital PDF. Digital PDFs, rarely do you want to have them be facing pages, which is spreads, because it's hard to read a PDF when it's a spread. You kind of need to have those single pages all the way down. So let's do facing pages. We can convert this to a digital document later. And we're going to stick with 2 columns. I have 2 columns here for our layout. Common gutter is fine. We're going to have some thicker margins than the default for the same reasons of the last project we did, where it's nice to have a little extra breathing room than the default. So we're just going to make that 0.75 all the way around. We are going to have bleed on this project because we're planning on getting this printed someday. So let's add a little bleed. Standard bleed in inches is 0.125. So we're just going to do 0.125 all the way across. That is 1/8 of an inch. Don't worry about slug for now. We will worry about that later. Let's go ahead and create our document. So we're going to go ahead and go to pages and kind of see what our document looks like. The first page all by itself is always the front cover. And the back page all by itself is always, the very bottom one is always the back page all by itself. And these are all the inside spreads. So when you open up the book, this is the front page. Going to double click on the first spread. And this is going to be the inside of the front cover. So you usually don't want to put a whole lot on this left side, maybe a photo or maybe some copyright information or a title. But rarely do you kind of print on that back cover unless you need to. So this will be kind of that opening welcome message, and then this will start to get into the recipe spreads down here. So let's go ahead and work on our front cover. We have our bleed. You can see our bleed, which is the red line, and our nice thick margins and our 2-column layout. So with a front cover of a book cover, we have our logo. So let's bring that in because that's definitely the mainstay of the book, is the title and the logo. So this is Dessert First Cookbook. So I'm going to go ahead and take this I'm just going to go ahead and select this blue gold one. I'm going to right click and group it. And another thing you want to do is you want to make sure all the type is outlined. If I were to bring this in without the type outlined, sometimes it doesn't convert over to InDesign very well with the live typography. So you just want to right click and create outlines, and it's already been done for you here. So I'm just going to drag this over, and it's going to bring it over as an EPS. I'll show you what happens when you just drag a vector object into InDesign. Most of the time it goes over really well. I can select this fork and this spoon and just drag that over, and it brings it over as an EPS file, so I can make it a little bit bigger and it keeps its resolution, which is fantastic. But sometimes when you have complicated vector shapes like this logo, for example, where you have a lot of different layers and you bring it in as one object, so let's go ahead and bring it and just dragging it right into InDesign, sometimes you get some really strange results. In this case, for some reason, it made this outline of a gold stroke that we have just a stroke. It made it a fill, and it's kind of confused how to work with it. So we can ungroup this, and we can flip that to stroke, but that's not quite exactly how we want it. So if you ever run into those issues, I'm going to show you another way to bring it in. So we're going to open up a new document. It doesn't really matter the size because it's going to be an EPS. It's going to be vector. So the size is not quite as important. So let's do a standard 8.5 by 11 and just create, I am in Adobe Illustrator right now, and we're just pasting the logo file. I'm making it pretty big. And let's go ahead and go to File, Document Setup. I'm just editing the artboards, or I can use my artboard tool and just collapsing that down. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this as an EPS. So save as a APS, which is a vector file. I'm going to do book logo. Click on Use Artboards and save. You can also save as a PDF as well. So PDF or .eps will keep that logo vector. So let's bring in the logo, and I just went ahead and dragged it in and pressed the button, and look, voila, it went in perfectly. So just sometimes that transition between Illustrator right into InDesign, some funny things can happen. It's very common. So if you ever have that issue, bring that logo in as an EPS or a PDF and bring it in just like you would any file or photo. So now we can make this the nice size. I'd love to keep it. I'm going to go ahead and toggle off W since columns don't matter quite as much at this stage. And we can go ahead and get our grids on if we want to do all that so we can get it aligned. But since I have smart guides on, so you notice how I bring this over, you can find the center point by finding that pink line, vertical line. So we know that's going to be right in the center. And we can drag it down and find our center horizontally. Right there, we know it's smack in the center. If you don't see your smart guides, you can go to View, Grids and Guides, and go ahead and toggle on and off smart guides. So smart guides, I always have them all on because it always helps me. So now we need to create a dynamic front cover. So what is most important thing about a cookbook is how the food looks. That's how we sell a cookbook, is having this delicious desserts. So we're going to feature 2 photos because sometimes just picking one photo is really hard when you have a very a variety-filled dessert book. So we're doing brownies and cupcakes, and it's really hard to choose one photo over another and have that represent the whole book. So we really want to have a story-driven narrative. So let's have 2 different photos so we can represent 2 different kinds of desserts. So I thought what would be neat if we had this top-bottom split. So we kind of have this pie right here in the middle. So the focal point is going to be your eye focusing right on the title. So if we have a photo on the top and a photo on the bottom, I think it would be a nice balance to the overall piece and would draw the viewer's eyes right into the center, which is what we want it to, where we want our focal point to remain. So I'm going to locate 2 great photos to use, and we're going to bring those in just like we did previously with other photos in InDesign.